I give a talk to college students and other young people called What I Wish I'd Known About Sex and Relationships When I Was Your Age.
Oh, tell us everything. Tell us everything right now.
I try hard to keep it to an hour, but sometimes it's an hour and a half.
Welcome to Sleeping Around, where we offer a peek behind the curtain of modern sex and relationship therapy and research, bringing you insights and conversations otherwise reserved for the therapy room. I'm your host, Elena Joy, a Master's of Counseling Psychology student, content creator, and lifelong sex and relationship nerd. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Sleeping Around. Today's guest is an advocate for ageless sexuality. She has been dubbed a senior sexpert, the woman leading a sex revolution for seniors, and the conversation that we have in this episode feels important. We are speaking with Joan Price, the author of 4 books about sexuality, including the award-winning and newly updated Sex After Grief, Navigating Your Sexuality After Losing Your Beloved, and Naked at Our Age, Talking Out Loud About Senior Sex, which was recently chosen by the New York Times as one of the best 8 books about sex. She is an internationally popular public speaker and sex educator who is now 81 and has been writing and speaking about senior sex since 2005. In this episode, we cover a whole host of topics around aging and sexuality. We answer questions like, if the old ways of sex don't work anymore, what do I do? What can we expect in sex when we age? What can we do to prepare for senior sexuality? We talk about sexuality during, through, within grief. And overall, we discuss and address this idea that senior sexuality or sex in later years is somehow shameful or yucky. Joan is an absolute delight, and I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. So do you want to start by just telling us a little bit about you? What got you on the path of advocating for ageless sexuality?
Getting old and having good sex? I mean, that's a short answer, but I'll give you a better answer than that. I just turned 81. I've been doing this work for 20 years. My first senior sex book, Better Than I Ever Expected, was published when I was 61 years old. And the way this happened is that when I was 57, I fell in love with a man who was 64. It was the great love of my life, and for both of us. We were together 7 years, from first kiss to last kiss, and I lost him to cancer. But while we were together, I thought, we are having such great sex. It's not like young people's sex, but it is great sex. And where are the books about this? Because all I could find at that time, 20 years ago, was if sex was mentioned at all with aging, it was doom and gloom. Your hormones do this, your vaginal tissues dry up, and you might as well just play with your grandparents and I don't know, play pickleball. I don't think they even had pickleball yet. But I was not finding anything about the joy. I was not finding anything about, well, these are the actual problems. How do we work around them? Or what do we do about that? There was nothing there. So I decided to start writing my own books. And this was my third career. I was a high school English teacher for 22 years. After a near-fatal automobile accident, I became a fitness professional and a writer about health and fitness. Where my life takes me determines how I spend my time and where I develop my next passion. I am just so thrilled to still, 20 years later, be doing this work and to be on shows like yours, Elena, and spreading the word. I guess that's the long answer to your short question.
I'm so thrilled to be having this conversation because just like you said, what you hear about sex and aging, even about relationships generally in aging, is so doom and gloom. It's so like, your desire fades, and how do we keep the spark alive when it inevitably fails, when our bodies fail and our minds, like all of this kind of really frightening stuff. And so I love hearing you say kind of that first book is titled Better Than Expected. If we talk about the pieces that are better than expected, instead of starting at the problems and like practical tips to solve them.
And that's really how it went with my career. I wrote Better Than I Ever Expected to celebrate the joys of older age sexuality. And then people came out of the woodwork to ask me questions, say, well, that's great. You're having great sex. I'm not. What do I do about this, this, and this? And so then the rest followed. But you're right to start there. There are so many ways that sex in our later years can be better than ever. It's not hormone driven. Now, that can be seen as a bad thing because then it's harder to get aroused and we have to work around certain things. But in a way, that's really lovely because we want to have sex for other reasons than the hormone rush that is actually supposed to propagate the species. It's not supposed to be for pleasure. But now we can choose to have sex just for pleasure. And we can choose that sexual expression can take different forms than what it was when our hormones thought we had to propagate. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can you give some examples?
Well, yes, it may be that penetrative sex takes a back burner to all these other ways that we can get aroused and reach orgasm. We might find more joy in oral, in manual, in sex toy-assisted sex, not just solo, but with a partner. And we can enjoy it for its own pleasure. We don't have to have a goal. We also can find it's better than ever because at this stage of our life, we've learned some things. We've made our relationship mistakes. Maybe we don't have to make those anymore. Maybe we can be choosing better with an ex-partner if we are no longer with the person we started out with, which is frequent, I have to tell you. We also know how to communicate better than we used to. Used to be, we just expected a partner to read our mind, and now we know that probably isn't going to happen. So if we're going to get what we need and want, then two things have to happen. We have to know what it is, and we have to express it in a loving and inviting, welcoming way so that it happens. And the more we learn to do this, it's constant learning. It's not automatically, oh, I'm old, everything's great now. No, oh, I'm old, there are challenges. Okay, let me figure this out because I've got some skills for figuring things out by now. There's also that we understand more about how our body works. I mean, when I think about sex in my teens and 20s, I think about it with respect, but not really with love, because I think this is probably true of many people of my age and maybe of all ages, that we start having sex wanting so hard to please a partner so that our partner will keep wanting us, that we may lose or not even know what will work for us. And our partners may be completely misinformed about what might be right for us, what might get us off as a young person, not just at our age. At least at this age, a new partner will know to say, what do you need? What do I need to know about what works for you? If the partner's worth keeping, the partner is going to express that in some way. And if you arrive for a first sex date with a pouch and you open it, I'm speaking from experience here, and you say, this is the lube we need to use. This is a vibrator that I need in order to reach orgasm. This is what my body needs. It's nothing about you. It's about what I know about me. We can learn to say that at this age. We can learn that what's the worst that can happen? The person isn't interested in pleasing you. Well, good to know that ahead of time.
Yeah, right.
What's the other downside? I don't know any.
It's so interesting because, like we said at the beginning, you think about sex and aging, and it almost feels like a kind of negative connotation. There's maybe a bit of a like nerves feeling, like what's that going to be like? Am I still going to be sexual? All of these questions. But what you're describing, it sounds like goals. Like, I'm like, that's the sex that we want to be having now. And you're describing that, like, this is something you come into with age. And, like, what an incredible thing.
Well, that's the thing, that we don't just want sex. We want good sex. We don't want sex that isn't pleasurable for both of us if we're in a partnership. We want to keep our sexual self alive and thriving. We can do that on our own. We can do that with 1, 2, or a dozen of the best sex toys out there. And by the way, I review sex toys from a senior perspective on my blog. It's a tough job, but someone has to do it, I always say.
Your blog will be linked in the description. It'll be in the show notes for anybody who's curious. I think it was joanprice.com. Okay, so what would you say are some common misconceptions then? I feel like we're kind of addressing a broad misconception of like, yes, you have a sexuality when you age. Yes, you can remain a sexual being.
Yeah.
What are some other misconceptions that you come across?
Well, the big misconception is that we age out of sexuality. We age out because we're no longer desirable, because we can no longer have the kind of sex we used to, and nobody wants us anyway, and it's icky. I mean, these are the misconceptions of our whole culture. And unfortunately, even my age group has internalized those misconceptions. And that's the really hard thing, is when people come to me with their questions, which I got to say, I get a lot of questions, and they're based on a couple of things. One is the old ways don't work the way they used to, and I don't know what to do instead. Or I still feel sexual and I should be ashamed of myself, right? Why do we do this to ourselves and to each other?
Yeah.
The beginning of my sex education career, I was interviewed by a man in his maybe 40s, I don't know, seemed to be a reporter, and he said, well, I get everything you're saying, Joan, but I just can't imagine my parents still having sex, or my grandparents. Ew! And I said, at what age do you plan to retire your genitals?
Yes.
He got it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a good point, because it's like we, as a society, there is this kind of shame element around a naked older body. Like, I love horror movies. I'm a big horror movie buff. So my mind goes, as you're talking, is like, often a senior body is used as some sort of like horror tool, right? Like
tool or ludicrous or...
Exactly, yeah. So it's like we've been kind of force-fed this idea that aging equals non-sexy, right? Like everything opposite of sexy. And so when you think of yourself and you're like, well, I would like to remain sexual as a being into whatever age, and then while simultaneously holding these feelings of like, but other people at that age are somehow, you know, imagining them having sex is like unappealing and all of these things. It's like, well, you can't really have both.
Right.
So what do we do, Joan?
Well, we open our minds, for one thing. We try to look at our own progression. When women tell me, I just can't imagine being naked with someone now with all of my folds and wrinkles and puckers and all. And I say two things. One, where did you learn that? Who taught you that was something to be ashamed of? And the other part of it is, at what time of your life were you ever satisfied with your body? We never are. I look at some photos of myself from my 20s and I look at it now and go, wow, I was really cute. Did I think so at the time? Oh, no, I was worried about this and that. And it was just stupid. And then the older we get, I love the aging process. For one thing, I almost died 5 days before my 36th birthday. in an automobile accident. So every minute I have, let alone every year, is a gift that I might not have experienced. So I am delighted to be aging. What's the alternative? Dying young. There's no anti-aging, and I wouldn't want it anyway because I like who I am now. I like what I'm doing. I like that I now will say no to requests for my time for things I don't want to be doing. There's so many ways that aging is really wonderful. And if we stopped ourselves from enjoying that because we're wrinkles, I mean, I'm really wrinkled. My wrinkles have wrinkles. So if we can embrace it, we will feel better about ourselves. If we fight it, or if we say, oh, I'm just uglier by the second, I'm uglier this week than I was last week, how does that serve us? What good does that do anybody?
Yeah, there's an internal sort of like a joy at life itself piece and kind of an appreciation of your physical body.
It's nuanced. Aging is nuanced. It isn't something you see every day. You look in the mirror and go, oh, there's that change that I didn't see yesterday. But over time, I joke when someone, I teach line dancing, and when someone in my line dance class says, I'm having cataract surgery, I say, well, watch out, because cataract surgery causes wrinkles. And they say, what? What do you mean? You look in the mirror after cataract surgery and you'll know what I'm talking about.
And then they're like, well, in that case, I don't want the surgery, actually. Never mind, not worth the wrinkles. And so you mentioned that there are changes that happen, and one of the questions that you get is maybe the old ways don't work anymore, I don't know what to do. What are some things that as a sexual person, as somebody who hopes to remain sexual, what are some things that I can expect?
For any gender, you can expect that your response time will slow down, that you will need much more stimulation, you will need more warm-up as well as direct stimulation. And for penis owners, erections become less dependable. It may not be true ED where you don't get an erection at all, but you may, sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it lasts long enough for the sex act you wanted to do and orgasm, and sometimes it comes and goes and it's just not dependable. And for penis owners, just to reiterate, you don't automatically become erect because a beautiful breast comes into your vision the way it might have worked before. You need the direct stimulation, and you need to be able to communicate that to a partner who will think, if it's a heterosexual relationship, oh, I'm not attracting him anymore because he's not getting erect quickly. So you need to combat that. For vulva owners, depending on the hormone replacement or not, and that's got to be a discussion with your doctor, the normal signs of aging are that the vaginal tissues thin, spontaneous desire may slow down or disappear, and you may need to understand what responsive desire is. You will need more time to get aroused. You'll need more warm-up and more direct stimulation. You might find that no matter how skilled your partner is, that you need clitoral stimulation with a vibrator in addition to whatever your partner is providing you with. You may also find that because of the changes in your vagina, vaginal penetration is not as pleasurable or comfortable as it used to be. And one thing I want to say to people of all ages, this isn't a defect. This is just a thing that can happen, and often, maybe usually happens. As young people, if some of you are watching, practice now different ways to have sex. Sex is, as Charlie Glickman says, a buffet of possibilities. It isn't just one entree on the buffet table to choose from. There are so many things you can choose from. So practice now arousing yourself and a partner, if you happen to have one, in many different ways without the goal being penis in vagina intercourse. And then when things change for you or a partner, you won't have to go, oh my God, I'm doomed. I'll never have good sex again, because you'll already know, oh, I got a backup plan. No problem there. We're already doing this and we love it. It's okay if we rely more on that. And if PIV can happen, sometimes we'll welcome it. And if it doesn't, we've got other things to do.
I'm in a counseling psychology program and I'm interested in sex therapy. And one of my professors, who's a sex therapist, she gave the example of, or kind of the metaphor of like a tapas menu, and saying that like sex should be, each time you have a sex experience, a sexual encounter, you're looking at the tapas menu and you're going, what would I like today? What do I feel like today? Right? And you're creating the meal.
Oh my gosh.
Each and every time.
That fits right into what I suggest people say to their partners. Not to assume on any given sex date that it's going to be what they did the last time, but instead to ask questions like, what hurts and what works today?
Ooh,
and
yeah.
Isn't that nice? I discovered that, a lot of personal experience here. And to say, how would you like me to pleasure you today?
Mm-hmm.
And here's how I'd like to be pleasured today, if the partner doesn't ask, but hopefully the partner will. And also experiment with taking turns, giving each other sexual pleasure, rather than assuming that there is one act that's going to be what both of us need today. You need this, I need this. Okay, who goes first?
Mm-hmm. It almost speaks to another question that's come up, which is like, how do I keep the quote unquote the spark alive, or how do I maintain desire over a long period of time? It sounds like what we're talking about would be one piece of that.
Yes. And another piece of that is to schedule sex dates. Now, for people who are saying sex should be spontaneous, when you get older, if you wait for sex to be spontaneous for two people at the same time, you may never have sex again. So let's just say that's not a requirement. If instead you schedule a sex date, and it can be a regular day of the week, it can be, I'd really like to have sex with you tomorrow. Would that work for you? What time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then what happens, other than it will happen, is that you start having that anticipatory arousal that you used to have when you were young. If you remember when you were first in a really good sexual relationship, you would start thinking about it days before you were going to see each other. You would plan your grooming, your underwear, when you would time your shower. You would lay out your clothing. It's maybe this. It's easy to get out of, but it really looks good on me. Right?
Yeah, there's a whole like ritual to it.
Exactly. If you've been with your same partner for decades, even if you live together, you share a bedroom, how do you make that happen again? Well, you do it that way. Let's schedule a sex date. I'd really like to have sex with you tomorrow. Do you want to have it right now? No, I want to look forward to it. I want to think about it, plan for it, charge the sex toy I'm going to bring with me. And then there are little tricks that I really love. For example, to have a sex basket for each of you. In the sex basket is the kind of lube you want to use, which might be different for you and for your partner, and a sex toy you want to be able, maybe a couple that you want to be able to choose from should you want it. It's charged, it's in the basket. You don't have to say, oh, wait, let me see if I can find, it is right here. Maybe a clean-up washcloth and whatever else, a massage oil, whatever else, a mask, I don't know. Have it all in the baskets. And by planning the baskets, by putting things in the baskets, I'm getting all tingled up just thinking about what I'm putting in my basket next time. Mm-hmm. So these rituals shouldn't be seen as a substitute for the dearly departed spontaneity. Instead,
Right.
think of it as expanding what sex is, not limiting it.
Right. It's like a reframe from I'm putting it on the schedule, therefore it's some sort of monotonous task, and reframing that to no, I'm putting it on the schedule and now I get to anticipate and prepare and get excited.
That's right. Well, if it's tomorrow, I better hurry up and wash that lingerie that he really likes and make sure it's ready to wear tomorrow. And I think I'll use this flavored lubricant for oral on him because I really like that. And just make it fun to anticipate. And then when you're in the moment, you don't have to stay with that plan, but the plan is there if you want it. If
Right.
your partner says to you, how can I pleasure you today? And you look at your basket, but then you think, nah, actually, I'd rather have something. Hold on, I want to get something else to put in my basket. You can do that. There are no rules that prevent you from having better sex.
It's like we're having a conversation broadly about sex and aging, but really every single thing that you're saying can be transplanted to, it would work for any age.
Yeah.
When you were talking about kind of things to expect and changes in your body, it feels less scary because in a sense, you're helping to normalize it. And so it's not like, it's just not something that we talk about. And so it becomes this kind of like scary unknown. And so when you're able to just name, oh, well, these are the normal things that happen.
Yeah.
And when they happen, it's because you have a body and the body is aging and it's normal. And also here are all the ways that you can still have this wonderful experience or this wonderful sexuality and all these things.
Well, absolutely true. And that's one of the things I say. I normalize talking out loud about senior sex. It's my day job, so I'll just talk about it in a frank way I talk about it, non-judgmentally. And it brings out questions in people. I've given talks in, for example, Midwestern cities where I was warned that no one will ask a question. That doesn't last at all.
Right. So what are some of the most common questions that you get?
Am I normal if? How often should we do that? I have vaginal pain. What should I do? My erections aren't dependable. What should I do? Or my husband doesn't get erect, so we don't have anything left to do. A lot of it is based on there being no education about this. We need sex education after menopause. And there are some places that do that. In fact, my book, Naked at Our Age, was used as a textbook for a course in aging and sexuality in a senior living space.
You mentioned like having the same partner for many years. That also leads me to think about your book on grief and sexuality. And death and loss is a part of life. It's a part of aging. Yes, there it is. Sex After Grief. Again, it'll be linked in the show notes for anybody who's interested. But can you talk a little bit about sex and grieving, relationship and grieving?
What I talk about is grief of losing your partner. There are other kinds of grief that can put you in much the same space. And some of the things that I'll answer your questions with apply to whether you have lost a mother, a child, a precious pet, a friend. But the reason that I target sex after grief after losing your beloved, because there is no book on that.
Yeah.
It's something that isn't addressed. And so people who are grieving, who feel the emergence of their natural sexual feelings and urges, are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm betraying my partner who died because I'm even thinking this way, or I'll never want to have sex again because I don't want to lose someone again, or I don't want another committed relationship. Or they'll think, I was in this marriage for 52 years. I never knew anyone else. I'd kind of like to go wild for a while. Any of these things can happen. But people always shame themselves or others shame them, no matter what the response is. People say, you should be dating by now. You should not be dating so soon. People say, what are you doing running around like a slut? Or they say, come on, live a little. You can't win. And so what I do is in this book, which is in a relaunch with an expanded edition, new chapters, new stories, is I wrote my own grief journey where I tried pretty much everything at one time or another to see, am I ready for this? Nope. Am I ready for this? Maybe. Am I ready for this? Oh, yeah, but oh, no, maybe not. And I also, because I know everybody's grief journey is different, I invited other grievers to send me their stories of their feelings about sex during grief and after a period. I mean, you're not done with sex, so after grief is kind of a misnomer because you don't get over grief, you get through it. You move forward, you don't move on. But I asked people, tell me your stories. And I got so many wonderful stories. This was in 2019 with the first edition. And they would tell me about being absolutely distraught, and then suddenly they spark with someone. And oh my gosh, look what just happened. I didn't think this was possible for me. There were a bunch of those stories. There were some that weren't like that. And I also incorporated expert tips, some grief counselors and other experts. And 5 years later, I'm thinking, I want to revisit this book for two reasons. One is that I've gotten so many new questions from people who read the first edition, and they want to know more. They want me to go more deeply into, for example, can you fall in love with someone else when you still love your departed beloved? Do you lose one if you do the other, or can you do both? Or does a new relationship have to look like the old one? What if I don't want to live with someone, but I want to be a regular sexual partner with them? Yeah, I have a whole chapter on how to do that. So the other thing, the reason too, is that I wondered, the people who sent me their stories 5 years ago, what's happened since then for them?
Oh, yeah.
Are these new relationships still blooming? Did they move forward? Did they, what happened? And so I contacted all of the grievers. Some I was not able to actually get to, but many I could. And I said, I invite you to send me an update of your story for the new book. And they did. Oh my gosh, some were still with that person they were so excited about 5 years later. For some, it became what Gail Sheehy calls the pilot light lover. That person got their flame going, but it didn't last. You know, that was just to get that going, and that was enough for that person. And there were others that married the new person, and sometimes then the new person died. It wasn't all great. And so then I thought, oh, I need another new chapter when life throws you curveballs. And how can I encourage people to get out there and to open their hearts to a new love or to new relationships, whatever form that takes, if that could happen again. But if you think back for the people for whom it did happen, where they lost their second person, if I ask them, was it worth it? Oh gosh, I wouldn't have missed that. I wouldn't have missed the years we had.
Wow. One of the themes that you kind of mentioned is shame. And I can imagine, as you were giving the examples of kind of re-experiencing desire after the death of your partner, or, you know, feeling that kind of spark and then thinking, oh, am I betraying my person? All of that is then compounded by the reactions that you get from others.
Right.
So we know that this is how the world currently operates. How do we function, you know, through that reality?
If you are currently in a relationship, sit down with your person and say, if I were to die before you, or if I were to become incapacitated and unable to still be your partner in the way we are now, I want to give you permission, I want to give you my blessing to find pleasure, to find love with someone else.
Oh, that's making me feel emotional. Wow.
It's so important, Elena, because if you and your partner say that to each other now, when you still can, that shame won't have to be a part of what you endure or what you're leaving your partner with.
Yeah.
And I say this to people of all ages, just sit down with this person and say it out loud, however you want to style it. I had people who never heard that and didn't know that. And they are filled with shame and anguish. And so I tell them, imagine, fantasize that your partner has come back to you to deliver a message about this. What would your partner tell you? And they usually can then come to that. They can say, well, my partner would not have wanted me to cry for the rest of my life, to mourn, to be alone, to put up walls. It's so important, but the giving them the permission with your words in writing or out loud or both would be even better, or record it, make a video of yourselves saying it to each other. I mean, grief is going to be awful. It's the worst thing that we have to endure is grief. Worse than anything that we do to ourselves or that our bodies do to us. But if you can give your partner that gift and get that gift back, the grief will have that other side to it.
I can imagine how powerful an exercise like that would be, whether it is face to face with your loved one currently or imagining them sending you that message. I can just only imagine.
I was very fortunate that my Robert, when he was dying, he gave me that. He didn't say it quite as directly as I've said it to you, and I do believe in saying it directly. But he said to me, you have so much love in you. Reach out to people. And there's another griever in my book whose wife, who was ill for a long time, said, when I'm gone, don't be a hermit. Do not be a hermit. That's just the greatest gift you can give, is to give your partner those words.
And not something that you would necessarily think of without, conversations like this. It's such a actionable tip. Do you have other advice around if somebody's looking to, or maybe somebody is experiencing grief, right? And they either want to get that desire back or they're starting to experience it. Do you have any advice around reconnecting with yourself after grief?
One of the things that stops people who think, I'm starting to feel sexual, I even have a crush on someone, or there's this old friend who is coming back into my life and he's not making any moves, but I kind of wonder what it would be like. One of the things that stops people from acting on that is they think, well, it's going to be all or nothing. It's going to be, if I bring it up and if I say, yes, I'd like to explore sex with you, then it's going to be, okay, we get into bed, we get naked, we do full on everything. And maybe I'm not ready for that. Maybe I just want to know what it feels like to get excited again and not necessarily do anything about it right away. So I give people scripts, not because I want to tell them what to say, but so that they have an idea of a jumping off part for creating their own script. So, for example,
right.
I am attracted to you, and I kind of wonder what it would be like to hug and kiss you for a while. Would you be open to that? If you aren't, it's okay to tell me. My ego is not involved. We'll be friends.
Yeah.
But if you are
No
open to that, I just want to say that I am vulnerable in my grief, and it may be that's all that I'm ready for right now. So please, can we only agree to do that much right now? And then if that feels good, we'll plan another date. And maybe one more step. See, you can define what you need. You can set the boundaries of timing as well as what you do, when you do it, how much you do. And if someone is not open to that kind of request, that kind of respect for your vulnerability, then that isn't the right person to open to sexually at this point.
I feel like this is another area where it's something you could start practicing now in a sense, because what you're describing, it takes a whole lot of skill in terms of self-reflection and knowing what feels good and knowing what you want or what you don't want, knowing your boundaries. It's something I imagine we could start, again, practicing now in terms of checking in with yourself to see what feels pleasurable versus what maybe you're not interested in each moment and all that.
Yeah. And I'm smiling also because I give a talk to college students and other young people called What I Wish I'd Known About Sex and Relationships When I Was Your Age.
Oh, tell us everything. Tell us everything right now.
I try hard to keep it to an hour, but sometimes it's an hour and a half. But the point is that I have learned that the things that I had to learn year by year are still things that young people are trying to learn. Young people have such an advantage over my generation and even the next couple of generations after me. We've got a lot of generations between us. But when I was growing up, we did not have any sex ed about pleasure.
Yeah.
We just had fear-based sex ed. And reproductive explanations, and that was pretty much it. We didn't know about desire. We didn't know about arousal. We didn't know how girls could have orgasms. We didn't know that. And we didn't know how to ask for what we wanted, or even that we had the right to. And once we got into our first relationships, plural, we had to learn it as we went, or we didn't learn it at all. And we just had to kind of hope that the next one would be better without being able to set it up for ourselves. And when I give the talk to young people, I've been doing it virtually now for several years. Well, since COVID started, I haven't been traveling, but I've been giving many presentations virtually. And the students will write in the chat, "Oh my God, me too." And they're also afraid to voice their wishes because they're afraid that they will disgust their partner with what they want, if it's something maybe kinky, or if they say they don't like something that their partner is doing, that the partner will break up with them. They're very fragile. And I think that's a real sad state that girls are still raised that way.
Yeah.
I think it's all in nurture. It's not nature. It can be learned. Something different can be learned.
And so the pieces that you wish you had known are around pleasure, desire, boundaries, that kind of stuff.
Also, relationships and what breakups mean. Because people often in their first relationship or first serious relationship, or maybe they've had some flings, but this is it. They are really in love, and then it goes bad. Either it wasn't what it was supposed to be to begin with, and they just are finding that out, or it just isn't right for them anymore, or they've grown past each other, or there's been betrayal or some other toxicity. And they think, oh, but then I'll never have love like this again, so I've got to make the most of it. And what I have learned over multiple being in love and breaking up, because we can fall in love at all times of our lives. You can fall in love more than once. You can fall in love more than 5 times. You can. Our brain and heart are immensely malleable. What I've learned is that every relationship that ends leads to something better that wouldn't have happened, a person I wouldn't have met, a love I wouldn't have found, a growth I wouldn't have experienced had I not let this breakup happen. And this is one of the most important things to teach young people, I think, because they're really caught, they're stuck in not, when they're in the midst of grieving a relationship, whether they wanted it to end or not, it's still grief. And then they think, well, I'm not worth more, or I don't know how I'll ever find anyone who excites me the way this one did, even though everything out of bed was rotten, or that has such a wonderful relationship, except in bed when I was faking orgasms. We can make changes. We can always, at any age, make changes.
This whole conversation feels very like you're talking about breakups, and instead of a breakup being like a closing of a door and the end and a loss, you're talking about it like it's an opportunity for something new. And similar to everything we've been saying about aging, instead of it feeling like a decline, the way that you're describing it is like this full, learned, continuous growth. Like the language and the feeling is very different.
Yeah. And I love that we're talking about this, because this is so dear to my heart, to try to save people some of the angst of, going, oh, I'm feeling miserable and I'll never stop crying, except, well, Joan Price says that actually I will.
Yes. That's what we want. Your voice in everybody's heads, for sure.
And one thing that I learned, when I met my great love at age 57, well, I was not celibate for 57 years. I had many relationships. I had been in love a number of times. I had been married once. I thought I had been out of a relationship for a long time. I hadn't had a serious relationship for a number of years. And I thought, oh, this is all over. And then when I met Robert and fell so deeply in love and in lust with him, and it was just the most thrilling aliveness that I could experience. And then I thought, well, Robert, why did it take you so long to get to me? And he said, well, first I was living there, and then I was living there. Then I went abroad, and then I came back, and I was in a cabin in the woods for a few years. And then I arrived in Santa Rosa, and I came to your line dance class, and we met. Okay, he was always making his way to me, though he didn't know it, and I didn't know it. And these other relationships I had very good relationships for the most part. Some weren't. But the ones that were good but didn't last, I thought, oh, I understand now. They were keeping me safe until it was time to meet Robert.
No.
They were making me feel loved. They were helping me grow so that I would be ready. I would be the person that he'd want to date at that point.
Yeah, like you couldn't skip any of those
You couldn't
steps.
skip any of it. That's right. That's right. And Dan Savage, I'm sure you know him. He is so smart and wise and sassy. And he says, every relationship ends until one doesn't. And he also says, a relationship doesn't fail because it ends.
Absolutely. It's like you hear people, you get a divorce or something after 20 years and then it becomes a failed marriage. When it's like...
No, it worked for 20 years now. The next thing is, we'll see what the next thing is.
In your work overall with aging, with grief, with sex, is there one thing that you wish everybody knew?
Oh, when have I ever been able to be held to one thing? But I'll try. Sexual pleasure is your right throughout your lifespan.
Oh, you kept right on.
I have to be able to do one short sentence once in my life.
And we'll take it. It was perfect right at the end. Thank you so much for being here. Let's tell everybody where they can find you, and then we'll hop over into the extended version and answer some audience questions if you have a minute.
You can find me at joanprice.com. Everything is there. My books, my blog, a place to sign up for my newsletter. I send out a monthly newsletter with news and views about sex and aging. And in that newsletter, I tell you what I've been up to in a column, an advice column, and all these other things. So if you go to joanprice.com, poke around a bit, and I hope to hear from you.
Thanks for listening. You can also access all of our extended cut episodes with bonus content from every single guest over on Patreon at patreon.com/AlenaJoy. That's patreon.com/ALAYNAJoy. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at SleepingAroundPod for updates, teasers, episode discussions, and more. This episode was produced by Elena Joy and Danae Fender and edited by Corey Mosqueda. See you next time, back here on the couch.